Hey, welcome to Wanderlusting Lawyer. It is my turn to post a video from my recent 2-hour long conversation with Jeremy from Camino Guide and Nadine from Nadine Walks. We sat down, we had an amazing conversation, we talked all things Camino. Make sure you guys are following their channels too, because we've broken down our long chat into shorter video segments, kind of just depending on the specific topic. And we are each taking turns posting a video. So you won't see all the content on one channel. So I will have the links up above and post them below. But yeah, make sure you check out their pages and follow as well. Today we are talking about our fears before starting the Camino and how that maybe evolved over the course of going back and doing more and different Caminos in the future. Hope you guys are finding these videos interesting and helpful. Please leave a comment below, and yeah, just hope you guys are excited about these. We'll have several more videos to come, and we're posting 3 times a week. Monday is Jeremy's day, Wednesday is Nadine's day, and Saturdays are my day. So I hope you guys enjoy the video.
My fear was so basic. It was, I don't know if I can walk with this backpack on my back.
So I know that, we have all been back for at least a second Camino, in some cases, multiple Caminos. But I think, as we're kind of talking about what brought us to the Camino in the first place, like I'm kind of putting my mind back to where I was before my first Camino. And I know a lot of, I think, our channel followers are pilgrims who are planning for their first Camino. So I'm kind of curious, from the two of you, what did you, each of you, both of you, have fears before you went into your first Camino? Was there like stuff that you were worried about, whether it's rational, irrational? I'm just curious, because I know for sure I had some fears.
Yeah.
I had never done anything like this before, not even remotely close. So yeah, I'm curious what your mindsets were when you were preparing for that first Camino.
Yeah, so I had, I think, different fears maybe from other people, and I think we're going to talk maybe later about language and everything like that, but I speak French and Spanish, so that for me, and I've lived in both those countries, so that for me made me more comfortable with like the in-country experience. But my fear was so basic. It was, I don't know if I can walk with this backpack on my back. Like, I had done very limited practicing. I had filled up my pack with like a good amount of weight, but it wasn't really representative of everything I was going to have in the end. And my water bottle's full and everything. And I did, maybe like a couple 5, 6, 7 mile walks around the city of France. I was living in Montpellier at the time before I started, and just did some walks. And then when I got to Saint Jean, so I had a whole other suitcase with me that I sent ahead to Santiago because I was doing traveling before and after. But when I realized everything I had in my pack, I just was like very nervous about being able to actually accomplish the walk, especially from everything I'd heard about like the first days to Horizon, to Roncesvalles being super difficult, very uphill. I like didn't know if I had the capacity, if I was going to be able to make it. Like I work out and stuff like that, but from a hiking perspective, I had very little experience. So I think that was one of my biggest fears. And also, I'm like a huge planner. I'm one of those people that I don't have necessarily the Microsoft Excel itinerary that I circulate to my family like my father does, but I got that bit from him of like, I like to have a plan. I like to know more or less where my days are going to start and stop. And like, so, but then I heard from so many people, don't get too hung up on having everything planned out. So I found what I felt was a good compromise. And I had maybe the first like 4 or 5 nights reserved in places, using a lot of times booking.com, which I think still lets you cancel free of charge in most situations. And so then I kind of found my rhythm. I realized I could walk with a backpack. I didn't collapse, and I went from there. But yeah, just kind of like being nervous about where I was going to sleep and things like that. Just basically what goes through every person's mind, I think, before they do their first Camino, right? All those uncertainties. And then thankfully you're in the zone within like a day. You're like, I can do this. This is great. So those are my big fears.
Yeah. Well, I remember, so the first time I went and I did just like a week, and I only walked like 3 days of that, but I didn't say that in the 3 days that I walked on that first one, I had blisters on probably 2/3 of my feet in 3 days, because I had, when I was in the Marine Corps, this was just like, this was at every hike experience that I would get these blisters just everywhere. And I didn't understand why. Now I know. Reduce moisture, reduce friction. It was really about the moisture. My feet were getting super damp, you know, like from sweat. And so my feet would just be terrible. And I remember like, okay, so I had the 3-day experience, and then I'm about to go back and lead students. And I was like, what am I going to do if my feet are just completely covered in blisters and I can't walk? Because that was a real possibility. Fortunately, I had figured out in the meantime a little bit about from training about how to reduce the blisters, and felt a little more confident about that. But the other thing that was really scary for me was I didn't know what I was going to do if the students started breaking down. Because I took that first trip, there were 12 students and 3 faculty. And I was like, what happens if 2 of them are just like complete mess, or they start having terrible arguments or whatever? Like, how do I manage that when I'm trying to get them through a country? And the other piece was that I'd never led a trip before where students were just on their own for most of the day. Like when I start walking at the beginning of the day, I don't see most of them again until the end of the day. And so there was a little bit of uneasiness. They're all adults. They're all, 18 to 22, but still there was just some uneasiness about, but the other thing was, of course, managing all their fears, because all of the fears that you're talking about, Kate, plus probably some others, because they're 18 and you had an international experience and whatever, but they have all those fears, and then like trying to manage and tamp down their fires so that they can, sort of live into the experience. But well, and I would love to hear too when we come back, and maybe Nadine, you could speak this too. Do you still have fears when you go back and walk Camino? Like, do you still have those anxieties that you have the morning before, or the night that you get on the plane or packing your bag up? I personally don't have those anymore, but I imagine, at least for many people, that still stays.
I think that's actually a really interesting part of this question, Jeremiah, because my fears before my first Camino, I think really similar, Kate, to what you said, was more about, can I just physically do this thing? Like, can I walk 500 miles across Spain? I think, when I know I already said I've never done anything like it, but like, I wasn't an outdoorsy person growing up. I wasn't an athlete. I love walking, but walking around my neighborhood or walking for 4 miles on a hike on the local trails is different than walking. What do we walk on a Camino? 20, 25 kilometers, 15 to 25, right? Day after day after day. And so I think it was just that question, could I physically do it? And it is so true. Like when I was on the Camino for the first day, I think I just needed to get started, because I felt so much better once I was going. I still think there was questions of like, well, what if something goes wrong? What if I get hurt? But I think as soon as I was going, a lot of those kind of anxieties and nerves kind of, they went away, and it was for the most part fine. I think also I don't speak Spanish. And so knowing that I was going to be walking to Spain for a month, again, there were those, worries too. Am I going to be able to communicate? Is this going to be an issue or a challenge? I think on the Camino front says and again, we'll probably talk about this a little later, but I kind of found that it wasn't so bad. I kind of figured out what I needed to, learned a little basic Pilgrim Spanish. And there are so many other people who could help out. That wasn't so bad. But I think it's interesting now, as I've gone back to each Camino, are those initial fears still there? I think for me, those physical fears aren't. So I think knowing that I completed the Camino, I did the walk, I loved the walking part. I know that some pilgrims don't love the walking so much, even pilgrims who return again and again. It's just kind of part of the bigger pilgrimage experience. Jeremiah, yeah, that's the case for you. But I have to tell you, like, I love walking all day long so very much. And I didn't know that about myself before I went on the Camino. And so that actually, the physical act of walking there are a lot of reasons I love the Camino and return, but that's a huge one for me. And so I think year to year, I've really kind of learned what my body's capable of. I kind of have figured out my limit, but I can really push myself too. And that's, for me, it's a really cool part of the Camino. So it's interesting, like those fears aren't there so much. But I get nervous before every trip. I do. I think it's just the anticipation of I'm leaving what's known and comfortable, right? Like I'm leaving my bed, I'm leaving my routines, I'm leaving my friends and family. And even if I kind of know the rhythm of the Camino, I don't know what this particular experience is going to hold. I don't know who I'm going to meet. I don't know if I'm going to meet anyone. I don't know what this terrain exactly is going to be like. And even though I said, yeah, physically I was scared and more nervous, you still just don't really know, right? So I think it's usually, yeah, the few days before I head off on another trip. The like for me, I think it's more nerves maybe than fears. The nerves always come back, but what works every time is I just have to see my first yellow arrow, right? Or my first kind of sign, the way marker pointing the way to Santiago. Because wherever you start from, if you are on a trail to Santiago, they are pointing to Santiago. And every single time when I've started the walk, my pack's on my back, and I see a yellow arrow, I feel like, all right, I know what I'm doing. I can figure it out from here. So.
I love the point you made about like learning what your limits are as you've done more and more Caminos. And I can definitely speak to that a little bit, having done the second Camino. And I feel like I kind of took all my assumptions from what the first one was like from a physical perspective and applied them to the second and thought I could just bust out like 30 kilometers on the first day, which included, some hilly-ish areas in southern France. And it was just way too much. And then pushed for 9 days straight. Like, whereas in my Camino Frances, my first day was to Horizon. So it was like, 8 kilometers? I mean, it's hard. It's uphill, but it's a short day. Roncesvalles is another short day. You don't really get longer days until several days in. I took a rest day in Pamplona. I took a rest day in Logroño. So I had 2 rest days within like a 10-day period or less. And this was pushing for 9 days straight. And like, I thought my feet were going to fall off by the end. I've never experienced, not even blisters, which I had too. But it was like a deep foot pain where I had to stop and like shake my feet out every 100 yards or something. Not quite that much, but so it is interesting because I feel like that's something, now, whereas I had a lot of fear going into the first one, I feel like no fear going into the second, which was pretty irrational. I'll have sort of a healthy mix of both going into whatever the next one is. But I also had a dog attack on my second Camino. So that's like a new fear that I have for sure with respect to like just wildlife in general. Like I was scared of cows after that because I just was so shaken up, and cows are so curious, they'll just stare at you, and some of them have really big horns, even if they're not bulls. And so that for me was, I think that's what's so cool is every time you do a Camino, and I'm sure Jeremiah, even for you doing the Camino Frances so many times, I'm sure every experience is just so different. And I met people that said they'd walked them before, and then on their 4th or 5th one, they developed a crippling foot issue or, just different things that can happen. So, I definitely will not overestimate my capabilities the next time I go like I did.
Yeah. I think I don't think I have any fears about the physical aspects of the walking anymore, except just a realization, like I say this on my channel all the time. I think that 95% of being able to do this from a physical perspective, it's mental and it's a lot of things, but like from a physical perspective, it's almost all injury management. And so like if and injuries sometimes come because you make some stupid choice, right? You go too fast, you go too long, whatever. But sometimes injuries are just because you fall down, you trip over something, they're accidents. And so I always know like the possibility is, even if I can do this over and over and over again, I might end up on a taxi tomorrow because you fall down and you can't do anything about that. So I think I don't fear that, but I do know that that's a possibility. I think now my anxieties are 2. One, I'm always, when I'm leading groups, I'm always anxious about what the group dynamic is going to look like, because that's different every single time, just depending on the personalities that are there, if anybody's having a particularly hard time or something. So I'm always worried about that every single time. I would say this upcoming pilgrimage that I have in May, I'm probably the least worried I've ever been, because I'm so excited about the 31 people that are going, and I feel really good about how they're going to do. But the other anxiety for me is, or fear, but just a sort of I know that one of the reasons that we go is for transformation, that we want to have this experience of allowing the walk and the way to speak into our lives and to change us. And so I try to really remain open to this possibility that not that the walk itself is going to be something to be afraid of, but maybe who I am going to be afterward is something that's not what I was before. You know, that in some ways it might really change me. And I had just this past year when I walked, I was going through some personal things that I was thinking through and praying about on Camino. And so, you know, all of that had the opportunity, the possibility of changing me and changing my life. And it did. And so, you know, that's I think a pretty significant aspect of this, particularly when you know the rest of it is somewhat comfortable. Like for me, walking and packing up and doing all that is not, I don't think very much about it anymore, but I still think, gosh, who are we going to be when we walk out of this? And sometimes because of the people you encounter, right? Like sometimes these people will change you because of something about the relationship with them. I think of how many people I know that have met their spouse and, you know, all these different things on Camino, and it's like whole world becomes different. I have a friend from seminary that she met her wife and moved to Germany and lives in Germany now. You know, it's like her entire life changed because of meeting her partner. So.
Hey guys, welcome back. I hope that was useful, informative. I hope any fears you may be experiencing, you're realizing they're totally normal. The most important thing is just to get out there and start walking. And yeah, check out Jeremy's channel in 2 days on Monday for the 4th segment in our video collaboration. All right, guys, see you soon.